So Izuku has finally returned to take on Shigaraki, and it's been a long time coming because I think the last time that we saw Izuku was like in June, which was at the end of chapter 357, when we saw that he was still making his way to UA by flying using a combination of his multiple quirks. And this is because at the beginning of the arc, he was like grabbed by Toga as the individual teams were being warped to their specific locations. And he was kind of stuck with that group for a little bit, but eventually he was able to break away from it with the help of Uraraka and Tsuyu, and he started to make his way back to UA because he was originally supposed to be a part of the team that was taking on Shigaraki in the first place. But as he was getting there, he was complaining about not being fast enough. And that brings us to the end of chapter 357, where we saw the vestige of Yoichi, the first user of One for All, appear and say, "Midoriya, I've got a bad feeling about this." And we saw like these things approaching Izuku. And at the time we didn't know what they were. Now we know what was going on, because in the distance behind Izuku arriving at UA here, as he's encountering Shigaraki, we see the jets of Star and Stripes' team. So that means that those things that were approaching Izuku in chapter 357 were these jets, which means that they found Izuku and then pretty much escorted him all the way back to UA, getting him there much faster than he would have gotten with his own abilities. Hey, also guys, if you like my Hero content, please subscribe if you haven't already. It's fine if you don't want to, but if you just need a reminder, here you go. Thanks. And now that Izuku's finally here, he's going to be taking on Shigaraki in his alleged final form or apex form. I don't think this is the peak of him. Maybe it is for Shigaraki individually, but it remains to be seen for All for One or the All for One / Shigaraki consciousness once it's fully been assimilated, which I assume is going to happen after the whole All for One versus Endeavor and Hawk stuff wraps up. But it's explained in this chapter why Shigaraki is going into this form, and of course it's due to the alterations that Yujiko had performed on Shigaraki's body so that he was strong enough to be able to utilize the full power of All for One. Like, the quirk itself has just become too strong and it needs like this special type of body to harness it. And due to his quirks being erased by Aizawa and Aoyama, he wasn't able to use regeneration for like the longest time, and he's accumulated a lot of damage in this battle as well. On top of that, he's had a bunch of mental stress and it drove Shigaraki to the brink, and at this point his body is evolved into its apex form, perfectly crafted to deal with the threats he faced. And I gotta say, this looks really cool. It's like the super final form version of what we originally saw of Shigaraki when we were introduced to him, you know, when he used to wear the hands of his deceased family members. And speaking of them, they're now like the fingers of like this giant arm that he has. But first, real quick, let's talk about Gamer Supps, because it's currently September, and that means every week there's going to be a new waifu cup drop. And starting this week, it's the Teacher Cup. This thing is aesthetically appealing in more ways than one. And these things are great not only because they're aesthetically appealing, also it makes drinking Gamer Supps so much easier. So for example, you can take the new Emotional Damage, which is like a strawberry peach flavor, add it to your waifu cup, shake it up, and now it's become that much more aesthetic. And there's also teacher shirts available too. This thing's pretty aesthetic as well. I really like this. I'm probably gonna be wearing it out any chance I get. So guys, check out the link in the description and make sure you use my code BIGZ at checkout. That way you'll get 10% off your purchase. Thanks. But he's pretty much like in a condensed form of what we've been seeing these last couple chapters, where he's just been flooding the entire area with just his flesh and fingers and everything. And now that he's acquired this form, he's not playing around anymore. And he just one-shots Mirko, Tamaki, and Nejiri in order. And he doesn't even look at Mirio while this is happening. He's like, "I know just how powerless you are." And that's pretty much true, because while Mirio has an awesome quirk with permeation, he doesn't really have anything to capitalize on it with that. I mean, against a normal villain he would, of course, but Shigaraki is obviously the strongest of the strong. And unless you have like One for All type strength or something that rivals that, there's pretty much nothing you can do against him. Then we see Shigaraki like try to go after Best Jeanist and Bakugo, and he's like, you know, "Don't fix what someone broke," referencing when he originally killed Bakugo by piercing his heart. And speaking of that, we're not getting an update on what's going on with Bakugo. Like, he's still laying there. And we saw in the previous chapters that Best Jeanist had like stitched up his heart, and we saw that Edgeshot use like his ultimate ability to like repair Bakugo's heart and lungs, but also like become them at the same time. And I'm assuming that he's definitely going to come back to life, but we're just not seeing it happen yet. Like, I for sure see him fighting side by side with Izuku at some point, but not even Best Jeanist Genesis is able to contain Shigaraki because he's just too much of a beast now. Until suddenly Mandalay starts contacting everyone and she's like, we need to lift the electromagnetic barrier just for a moment. It'll take 2 seconds, so please hold on somehow. And this is, of course, because she's opening it for Izuku to arrive. Although at this point in the chapter, we don't know that yet. As Genesis is like, 2 seconds is way too long because, you know, this is battle manga and they're much slower than the seconds in our reality. But Mirio is like having an existential crisis at this point. After what Shigaraki had told him about just, you know, realizing how powerless he is. And he starts remembering like what Night Eye had told him before he died. Where a society without cheer and humor will not have a bright future. And Mirio takes that quite literally and comes in front of Shigaraki and says, hey you, check out this peach, and shows him his butt. Yeah, this happens. This is what Mirio has been reduced to. And when I first saw this page, I was like, this reminds me of like Naruto humor. And then I remembered, oh wait, this is straight up a sequence out of Naruto as well, because at the end of that series, when they're taking on Kaguya, Naruto does like the reverse harem jutsu to her, and he distracts her the same way that Shigaraki is being distracted by Mirio's butt here. And Naruto, it was enough for him to get a clean strike on Kaguya, and here it's enough for Izuku to come back in and land a strike as well. But first he uses like black whips to like slingshot himself, which we've seen him use before, but this panel is just amazing. And he successfully smashes Shigaraki here at the end of the chapter. And this is where things are really going to start getting interesting, because we haven't really seen anybody strong enough take on Shigaraki in his new form yet. And that's kind of like what the series has come to. Like the power creep has gotten so crazy that Izuku is the only one who can take on Shigaraki. Like before it was more feasible with like Aizawa shutting down quirks and whatnot, but as we've seen, it's not enough because his body is just too powerful even without the use of quirks. So now that Izuku is here, who allegedly has unlocked all of his quirks, even the second users, which we haven't seen him use yet, but he claims that he can use it, along with being able to use 100%. And even if he doesn't need to like fully go 100%, he could still use the faux 100%, which he may have used in his entrance here with the slingshot and the Fajin quirk, although it's not stated. But I don't know if this is necessarily like the beginning of the final fight of the series, but it's certainly taking us in that direction for sure. Because like I said, All For One hasn't like fully assimilated into Shigaraki yet, and I think that's going to be a big turning point. And like I also mentioned in my spoilers video yesterday, there's still a lot of stuff that we haven't touched on yet, like with the other students and their individual fights, and I think Horikoshi might cut away from this, maybe in the next 2 chapters or so, and then we're just going to be focusing on that stuff for a little bit, and then we'll come back to what's going on with Izuku taking on Shigaraki here. But that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. Let me know what you think about this chapter in the comments. What do you think about Mirio? What do you think about Izuku coming back? Let me know. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.